Chapter 6. The Dog and the Rooster. The big dog crashed against the bottom of the loosened board and drove it away from the wall. He plunged through the opening. Down below, at his crashing lunge, everything stopped in the barnyard. But in a week, the chickens had become used to the dog plugging down into the wagon box. The next moment, in the barnyard, everything went on as before. In the midst of a group of white chickens, the little red hen was in a hen fight for some hen reasons. The crash of the dog had interrupted the fight. But now, the little red hen leaped up at her white enemy again. The fight resumed where it had left off. The fight was mean and fair on one side, while the little red hen was fighting one white hen. Other white hens darted in and pecked her. The little hen, blinded with rage, chugging with frustrated rage, leaped up and raked at her puffed white chest before her with her useless, harmless knuckle bones. The whole group closed in on her. The little red hen went down, sprawling, buried under the white hens. In the wagon, the dog looked down at it, but in hitting the wagon box, the dog twisted his paw and he had to sink down for a moment, bite and lick at his own hurt. The rooster heard the squawking and came round the barn on a run. The white hens scattered, and there was only the little hen sprawled in the dust. The rooster charged at her, rapped at her viciously as if beating her for having gotten herself beaten. The little red hen choked out a wrenched squawk. At the sound of the dog leaped out the wagon and ran to the little hen. He ran right over the rooster and knocked him sprawling. The rooster picked himself up and pushed past the dog and ran up the ramp to sulk in the hen house. The big dog, plume tail waving in friendliness and greeting, touched his nose to the little red hen, and she raised her head and looked up at him. He nuzzled at her again, but they really had no way of showing their friendship. But here he was now. Their day together could begin. The chickens had all scuttled away and came back. The normal barnyard life was resumed. The little red hen got up, shook the leftover paint out of her hurt comb, saw an insect flitting along the shadows under the hulking machinery in the barnyard, and gave a chase. Tail waving, the big dog looked after her. Side by side, the big dog, and the little red hen ranged the barnyard. They roved about the barn and the hen house, scrounging along the walls for hidden grain kernels and the chicken tidbits. The little hen picked up things, tasted them for food taste, rejected or gobbled them. The dog tagged on behind. The pickings were lean this hungry morning. The men in the rage had kicked the flock out of the hen house to fend for themselves and not scatter a grain for them in the barnyard. He had even forgotten to fill the cake tin underneath the potato crate for the little red hen. Patiently with the little red hen, she forgot in a few moments the dog made 3 useless trips to empty the potato crate at the kitchen door. Back in the barnyard, the dog sniffed out a kernel of corn and stuck under the curved tooth of horror one kernel for his huge hungry body. He flopped to the side, roasted like a pig, to force the kernel free. The little red hen darted in, greedily picked up the kernel the dog had freed. The dog got up, looked at her, and accepted it meekly. But the tip of his tail waved in wistful question. The little red hen darted away. The dog hopefully poked his nose under the horror once more. But the little red hen squawked and pulled himself free, hurried to her. It was all that was needed. The white hen, pecking at the little red hen, scuttled away. The two stood together again. The dog looked longingly across the field at the distant swan. His tail began to wave. Rushed the little red hen. Then he started forward on a determined look into the field and whatever it might hold for him. By the way of food, the little red hen ran with him, but she ran only so far from the barnyard. Then, frightened by the strangeness, she uttered a single quick crackle, turned, and fluttered back. The dog stood looking at her, tail waving in indecision, but then he trotted after her. He had made himself her unquestioning slave. He stayed with the little red hen. It was his life. He was there to protect her and to put a quick end to her eternal fights. It was his duty. He had made it his duty. The little red hen did not know, could not accept, or could not remember that her new place was at the very bottom of the flock. By some inexorable flock code, and she had shoved down the number of 100 positions at the last and at least of all the flock, since she had lost her toes. And since she was at the very bottom, all the others had the fight loud it over her, pecked her mouth and bully her. That little red hen would not, or could not, accept. When they pecked at her, she fought, and when she fought, she lost. Toeless, she was harmless. But always she fought again. Only the big rooster was still somewhat impersonal. When she fought with other hens, he separated the two partially with slashing blow or two with the side of his hard bill. But always he seemed to rap the little red hen harder. Always he seemed to knock her down. The big dog ignored the rooster, and the rooster ignored him, except when the rooster came from some rooster instinct stepped in to punish the little red hen for fighting. That big dog would not allow. He did not snap or snarl at the rooster. He simply walked him down. And the rooster nearly almost remembered to keep his distance. He seemed to sense that the big dog had little patience with him. He seemed to accept the fact that the dog had made himself a sort of a rooster protector for the little red hen. It was the new life the dog had established for himself. He was the little red hen's protector, and he was her slave. He loved it. It gave him a purpose and a duty. He loved it maybe more than he loved the little red hen. If the little red hen did not sense or accept it in some dim way, the dog seemed to understand that by the code of the flock, he and the little red hen were really outcast. And if not quite outcast, since he was too big and powerful, at least they were outsiders. More and more, the big dog tried to lead the little red hen away from the flock into the fields beyond the barnyard. More and more, the little red hen tired of constant pickings and of being eternally bullied, tended to follow him away from the flock. But the strangeness, the wideness, and the emptiness of the stretching fields always get her back to the barnyard. She would step along beside the dog only up to such a point. Then panic and alarm would overtake her, and she would tear back to the busy barnyard, away from the big silence of the field. The dog would patiently trot after her. But the men in the morning raged by not feeding the flock and by kicking them out of the sconce food for themselves, and bitterly changed it all. There was nothing more to be found in the packed-over barnyard. There was no food in the hen house. Feed hoppers. Hungry and restless flock began to stray further and further afield. Hunger made them dare to step out under the high, empty sky over the flat, silent field. And their big dog led them, and the little red hen walked at his side. The flock did not follow very fast. The chickens spread over the near field, but they stayed in groups and tight little clusters. Like the little hen, they reached a certain point in the big strangeness where they would suddenly lift heads in alarm, eyes the high sky, and then in wild crackling fright race back to the barnyard. When one started for the barn, the others would catch her panic, and the chickens would not bolt everywhere. Gradually, they would urge into the field again. But the presence of the hawks over the swamp, the fear of hawks, kept the chickens close to the barnyard. The little red hen had gone too far into the field. Once, in panic, she turned from the dog and made a short, hurtling flight back. But when her flight ended, and then she stumbled down in the grass, she saw that the big barn still looked far away. The dog was near. The dog waited for her. She ran back to the dog, and he led the way to the swamp again. From the swamp came a wailing and soaring of thousands of hidden insects. The mysterious swamp stirred, weed tops waved, bushes sighed and bent. The wind swept in all plumes of high swamp grasses and bent them towards the little red hen.